Landing in the Bahamas, Columbus became delirious at the sight of the gold jewelry on the Arawak Indians. Believing great gold deposits existed on the islands, he began to mistreat the Indians. He roamed the islands of the Caribbean in search of gold. When little gold was found, he began to enslave the native Indians. The Arawaks were ordered to provide gold, or their hands would be chopped off with a sword, and they were left to bleed to death. The peace-loving Arawak, who welcomed Columbus into their world with food and gifts, friendship and respect, were in turn wiped out by Columbus, and are now an extinct civilization.
Columbus left a legacy that exists to this day. The hardships, abuse, and persecution still lives on, overshadowing each succeeding generation. The mission schools enforced a strict denial of contact with native culture, language, and traditions.
The people that came along behind him, he was here, I guess, up to the 15th century. Took him about probably 6-7 years to wipe out that many people. And with the methods they had of killing in those days, he must have not had time to do much else but kill people. Because he didn't have machine guns and weapons of mass destruction, yet. And he insisted, trying to force these people to be Christians. They had their own religion. He had holy people with him, priests and that. Brought them over here too. But they witnessed a lot of that, and it's coming out now. What really happened to us? What he really did. And I don't know about a country that would honor somebody like that. He's not the only one. It was a mass murder. A lot of them followed him. And George Washington, the father of our country, is right in the same category as him. Abraham Lincoln, killing our people. They say there was probably 60 or 70 million Indians in North America when Columbus arrived, There's only about 1 million now, and there's no explanation what happened to them. In our mission school, I went to a mission school for 12 years. I started in 1936, taught by nuns and priests. They'd make us act the part of Columbus on Columbus Day, dress up like him, like it was pirates and that, and, idolize him, hero worship, I guess. And they made us, made altar boys out of us, and to speak in Latin, say these masses in Latin. We'd have to talk Latin, pray in Latin in those masses. Everything we did was a sin. Our people were sinful according to the Catholic Church. Those missionaries that came over here. Our people were wicked, and we were little devils. Even when we were small, we were little devils. They had to run the devil out of us, I guess. They did it by beatings a lot of times. I've seen them break a kid's nose in 4th grade, bust his nose because he was late for school. He walked to school in deep snow. His snow was about up to here. He walked, he was late, he missed the bus. They broke his nose, beating him up. I experienced a lot of things in that school myself that I wouldn't care to go through. I wouldn't want my children or grandchildren to go through that. They were responsible for doing away with our language. My tribe, the Gros-Ventres, right now, there's not too many people that speak it fluently. My generation is probably the last that can speak some of it and understand some of it. But I remember a lot of songs that they never took that away from me. And my belief in my people, I still have that in our Indian ways and our spirituality. They never destroyed that, but they did it to a lot of other people.
When I was 10 years old, I was taken out of my home. My brother and I taken to a boarding school in South Dakota The name of it was Pierre Indian School. And the matrons, they were really mean. They whipped the kids a lot just for little simple things. There were children there that were really small. Maybe some of them were like about 5 and 6 years old. I imagine they were taken out of their homes too because they were just like orphans. They would do, for any little simple thing, they'd get a whipping. They'd either get paddled with a board paddle or whipped with a hairbrush, spanked with a hairbrush. And some of those kids couldn't talk English. I imagine maybe that's what they whipped them for, some of them. I didn't know all the children there because there were so many. A lot of them were from South Dakota. The Sioux, they, talked their language pretty much. That one night, one of the girls' dormitories wasn't too far from the boys' dormitory, and through the open window we could hear a boy hollering, hear loud noise, and their matron was, the next day, he was in my class, and the next day he told me that he really got whipped the night before. I don't know what she hit him with, something. Anyway, it made welts on his back, he said. He was still kind of like he was sobbing when he was telling about it. He was just a young boy. And they didn't feed us too good. They sometimes the beans they gave us, or like rice and stuff, would have bugs floating on top. But we had to eat it anyway in order to live. And my brother-in-law, we had to stay there. They took us out of our home and we had to stay there 3 years, during the summers included, and without getting to go home. Boy, we almost died of loneliness. During the summer, they made us like help in the garden, plant stuff. We had plant big gardens of vegetables to eat the next winter.
Now, we as American Indians, I guess they considered us and gave us citizenship around 1924. And as you trace back through history, any war that this country has ever been in, this government that has tortured us and violated our human rights and done whatever you can imagine that aren't supposed to be done to a people. Anytime this country got in trouble, stuck their nose into somebody else's business, they went to war. It seemed like Indian people were always the first ones to enlist, the first ones to volunteer. I've spent 6 years in the Army, 3 years each time, each enlistment. I'm a combat veteran of Vietnam. That's why I wear this cap. I wear this cap so no one will forget. But at the same time, I also believe, because of what was done to our Indian people down through history, that not one of us should serve in the armed forces for any reason.
they weren't allowed to speak their Gros Ventre language. And he remembers one young man, maybe he was about 12, 14 years old, he had been caught speaking Gros Ventre to his friend. And the priest, they used to wear these rosary beads. I don't know if it was like a belt or a necklace, but he said it was big, like the big marbles that kids play with. And they were strung on this chain, how they wear rosary beads. And he had this one kid held him up to a wall, and he was really going to let him have it with his fist. But first he wrapped that rosary bead around his hands, and he drew back and threw a real good punch at this kid. And the kid didn't. He ducked. And then he says, boy, the rosary beads just scattered all over the floor. He said the priest was really mad. The kid, of course, he ended up getting the strap. Didn't get out of that one.
As a young adult, I've been on my own, and with the assistance of people like Jimmy Main, Wilma and Warren Matt, my father and mother, and the people I've surrounded myself who cared enough that I learned the correct history. I learned that these weren't Columbus's intentions in coming to our shores. These people have encouraged me to learn and to search for my native Aboriginal history and to try and put this happening within the human history in perspective. Columbus was in search of slaves and gold. He exploited humans wherever he went. He fueled a mad slave market throughout the world in the European continent. He tortured children, women, men alike, so that they would produce gold for him. When he couldn't get them to produce any more gold, he made slaves out of them and shipped them off to the slave markets. I think that's a very horrid part of history that is covered up, and I can't believe the extent that it's covered up within the school systems in this country. If anything, the end of this year, we should, as a nation, cleanse ourselves of this dark moment and try to look ahead into the future and to see what lessons that can be drawn from looking back and from seeing how one culture just can totally annihilate other cultures. There's not a living Arawak in this planet not to be found. Columbus killed every one of them. That's something as a young person, I never learned that in public schools. I think the schools in this country today, for the most part, are perpetuating the class system within that's arrived on our shores ever since Columbus and afterwards. That's another part of history that's not presented. We see the historical figures like Christopher Columbus, Hernando Cortez, and George Washington, and the list goes on and on. We don't see the true figures that the Indians that tried to save what they had, they're not made out as heroes. They're made out as the enemy. And they're still presented as enemies to the public, even within education today. Education today should start serving the needs of all Americans and not just perpetuate historical myths.
As the quest for gold continues, new technologies only enhance the destructive forces that are ravaging our planet. Every last ounce of gold can now be extracted from the ore, as seen here at the Zortman-Landusky mine in north-central Montana. The process, which is used at this specific mine, involves laying leaching pipes on the ground and covering them with the crushed ore from the mining operation. This ore is then treated with a solution of sodium cyanide to extract the gold. The giant leach pads which result dwarf the almost steady stream of huge trucks bringing the ore for processing. Tailings that seep into the water supply have all but annihilated the fish and wildlife and now threatens the nearby reservation of Fort Belknap. This land has been held sacred for countless centuries as a place for fastings, healing ceremonies, and sun dances. The prior custodians of this Western world honored the earth and her abundant life-sustaining gifts. Nature has always been the heart of the traditional teachings, and great lengths were always taken to blend in with the environment. Nature was not shaped and molded for personal gain, but rather honored in prayer and song. For 500 years, the Western Hemisphere has been under siege. Man's consuming hunger for gold and wealth has been a continuous history of bloodshed and destruction. This driving force has led us on a path to madness, devoid of any respect to those who may stand in the way, or more importantly, respect for the very giver of these riches. Our sacred Mother Earth. In August of 1992, a 3-day camp was held for the children to pass on the traditional teachings. Young and old were brought together to recreate their past and preserve their culture.
Columbus was recognized as an integral part of American history, long before Native Indians were granted citizenship in the United States by the Act of Congress of June 2, 1924. The rampage of saddening destruction continues after 500 years. Everything we preserved for thousands of years for the future generations is in ruins, and all of our sustainable sources have been destroyed. We are reduced to poverty and are beyond despair. The prophecy came true. Our buffalo, the animal we respected and preserved for thousands of years for its beauty and for its purpose of being a natural living being, would be needlessly slaughtered and wiped out. Our original system of civilization, of respecting all forms of existing life, has become extinct. The destruction continues to grow toward the limits of dangerous proportions. The natural life of the mountains is being killed as we hear the cannibalistic, monstrous, thunderous, rumbling sounds of giant heavy equipment eating away at them day and night, strip mining for gold and destroying them forever. Indian children are shocked to see the ruins of their environment, yet they are not old enough to understand that the reality of the mountains is disappearing forever, that the plant and animal life and water will never be the same again. It is very disappointing for the past decade the U.S. Supreme Court has been ruling against American Indians concerning religion and tribal sovereignty.
Our people were they were the smartest people that ever walked this planet. Their teachings 5,000 years ago, or further back, their teachings are far more important today than they were at the ancient times. That we must preserve the history. The Indian people themselves, they will have to document the history based upon the original teachings from the elders. And the governments of the world, these governments will have to tap onto the environmental practices of the American Indians that has been practicing it here for centuries. We take a look at the arrival of the Europeans 500 years ago, 1492. The short time of 500 years in comparison with thousands of years. The short time here, what we are doing with the land. The classic example here today, the north side of the Rocky Mountains. Today, we're sitting in a circle with the children, with your children, and our children, talking to them about how to preserve the land. How can we live off the land? And same time, with these mountains, let it be instrumental to tap onto the higher power of mystery for healings, which we have been doing for thousands of years. I want to repeat that when we want to learn something, that we suffer in fasting. And that is our understanding, to get our messages from the higher power of the being and the spiritual beings that served us for thousands of years.
As part of the teachings, the children were brought here to honor and respect an elder. Coming Day, also known as Returning Hunter, held ceremonial sweat lodges on this sacred site.
The man that once lived here, his name was Coming Day and Returning Hunter. In our own Indian way, you children must realize no one has died. Part of the history you're going to study. There's two worlds. Our ancestors said, one here and it's planet here. Another life is a spiritual world. Those that departed this earth, that's where they move to another world. That's where this Coming Day Returning Hunter is. So he's not dead.
Also being taught is the ancient art of stone carving, which has played a major part in traditional culture.
She belongs to me. So he put this on the ground and started to roll.
The importance of storytelling was also emphasized as a means of keeping the culture alive.
It's really going across the ferry. Going after that truck. It started out like this.
Games are played to summarize what the children have learned over the past 3 days.
Cutting sheep.
Cutting the hide. Cutting sheep's hide. Someone's skinning the sheep for it.
That's a buffalo. Put horns on it.
Someone's skinning the buffalo for its hide.
Yeah, you got it.
Buffalo hide. Skinning buffalo for hide.
A bull. That's a bull. Eat it.
Buffalo and it was hide.
A big horn.
Don't pick it out. I got my hair off.
Hello, children. My name is Joe Azure. I'm the chairman of Red Thunder Incorporated. We've been gathered here the last 3 days to produce a video for the children, an educational video. And we haven't, a lot of different things we've discussed, such as the expedition of Christopher Columbus, and he discovered the continent here 500 years ago. But through the oral history, we have a different story, I guess you could say. We believe that Christopher Columbus came over here. He was a lost pirate, and he didn't know where he was. What he was doing was he looking for gold and riches, and he had a craze and a greed for gold, which still exists today. The violence created by the gold craze continues the threat of extinction of the human race, as it did to the Arawak tribe of the Bahamas in 1492. The large-scale destruction of mountain mining is a new method of destructive violence to the environment, and 500 years of continued threats to the human race in the name of self-serving interests, my job and my taxes, and no consideration of any benefits to the future generations. The new method of cyanide heap leach gold mining is creating a long-term threat of extinction to the Gros Ventre and Assiniboine people in the Little Rocky area, as well as the rest of the state of Montana. The future generations have the right to know their true history. The children have a right to enjoy the mountains, the land, and the clean water, and they should not be threatened anymore. We have to provide them with a stable foundation which includes the truth about their people, and more so about the sacred teachings of their Indian ancestors. Thank you.
A memorial feed was held in honor of our ancestors, who for centuries practiced and preserved the sacred teachings for future generations.
Today, Columbus is a heroic, historic figure in American history, even though he arrived 295 years before the United States was formed.
After 500 years of oppression, we propose mediation. It is in our history. We gave you everything, the freedom and riches you enjoy every day. We ask for your mediation. We request that you reintegrate our children back with nature. the right to restore ours and our children's original way of life, which is alcohol and drug-free, to restore the original environment with no crime nor gambling, and the right to exist and practice the original teachings of our ancestors.